Please join me in officially welcoming your next head football coach, Coach James Franklin.
James Franklin is a builder, and he's been a winner. And Virginia Tech is counting on him establishing that and reestablishing Virginia Tech in the top of the ACC pecking order.
For us to go where we want to go, everybody's got to give a little bit up for the team to achieve what we want to achieve.
When you're building programs, you can take lessons from Vanderbilt and you can take lessons from Penn State, but it's not like you can just bring that model and plug it in at Virginia Tech.
Every single person here has been brought here to reestablish Virginia Tech.
All these different places and all these different journeys, you learn things about yourself, you learn things about the profession, and you find ways to get the job done.
Let's go!
Hi, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of ACC Huddle. This is Wes Durham, and great to spend time with the brand new head coach of the Virginia Tech Hokies, James Franklin. Welcome back to the ACC, right?
I appreciate it. Yeah. I appreciate it.
I kind of want to chronicle your coaching career, your coaching journey. I find this whole thing fascinating. And I want to start with this. I know you grew up in Bucks County, right?
Yep.
When did you fall in love with football?
Well, grew up playing baseball and football primarily. Really kind of loved both, and then probably transitioned to falling in love with football probably in high school.
Okay.
Had some success there, state playoffs, those types of things, and just kind of caught the bug.
You mentioned the high school. You played at East Stroudsburg.
Yep.
Played for a Hall of Fame coach,
Yep.
a guy who's just an amazing career. Denny Dowds, I mean, I went back and looked at these numbers, 264 wins, 159 the PSAC. What was it about East Stroudsburg? Were you heavily recruited to that level, or is just the right place, right time type deal?
No, I mean, I was recruited Division II football in that league. There was some really good coaches, in that league during that time. But Coach Dowds had been at East Stroudsburg for 51 years. I played for him. I coached for him. I lived with him and his wife when I first went back as a coach. Still close with Coach Dowds and his family. But they had a huge impact on my career, really as a young man. It was a father figure for me in a lot of ways, too.
So this is where the coaching journey starts, the coaching roots, as it were. And this is the part I find fascinating. 95 was Kutztown, right? 96, you go back to work for Coach Dowds.
Yep, East Stroudsburg.
Okay, and here's the one I got to go little on this. You're the offensive coordinator of is it Roskilde Kings?
Roskilde Kings.
Of the Danish American Football Federation.
Yeah.
Okay, how does one become the offensive coordinator of the Kings?
Well, it was really one of those European leagues where they had 3 American players. Head coach was an American. So I was the quarterback and the offensive coordinator.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I got on a plane, flew 13 hours to a country I didn't speak the language or know anybody. It was a great opportunity for me to grow up and learn. The team hadn't been very good, so my contract ended at the end of the regular season. Well, we made the playoffs. I'd never made the playoffs before. I had accepted a GA at East Stroudsburg. So I actually finished up the regular season, flew back to Pennsylvania, started my GA, went to school for a week, flew back on the weekend to play 13 hours to play the national championship. We won the national championship, was able to get the MVP, and then flew back for school on Monday. That was a great experience and had a lot of fun, calling the offense. The head coach was the defensive coordinator and had a lot of fun with that.
So you're telling me your last competitive snap as a player, you won a championship?
Won a championship, yeah.
That's not many guys get to do that.
Yep, been trying to get back there ever since.
What about the Danish American Football Federation applies to James Franklin, the coach today? That's your first coaching job as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Okay. What applies today that you learned coaching in Danish football?
Well, it was a very different experience, right? I show up, again, I don't know what I really signed up for. I show up, everybody's sitting on cartons of beer and smoking cigarettes in the first team meeting, right? But again, we were able to win there. We put up big numbers offensively, had a lot of success, and had fun with it. And I realized maybe this is something that, I really can do kind of long term and have some fun with it. And my confidence grew there.
Yeah. Come back, you coach East Stroudsburg. Your coaching career is now kind of moving forward, right?
Yep.
Feels that way. You go a year at James Madison with Alex Wood,
Yep.
coaching wide receivers, I think, right?
Yep. Ron Prince was the O-line coach. That's how I kind of ended up going to Kansas State later.
Washington State with Mike Price.
Yep.
You go to Idaho.
Ryan Leaf.
Ryan Leaf.
Showed up. I wasn't there with Ryan, but I showed up for Ryan's pro day and all of that.
Yeah.
But that's where I met my wife. My
Okay.
wife's from Spokane, Washington.
Most important part of the whole
That's right.
process.
That's right.
Right. Next year, you're at Idaho State, and I think Larry Lewis was an assistant at Wazoo.
Yep.
Okay. So if I read this correctly, you end up recruiting coordinator and assistant coach, or just recruiting, or just an assistant?
I don't remember exactly whether I was
Okay.
the recruiting coordinator or not, but I had Southern California, LA. That was my recruiting area. It was my first full-time job. Guy by the name of Joe Lorig, who's now the special teams coordinator at Oregon, was my roommate. We were roommates there at
Okay.
Idaho State, and that was my first full-time job, making $23,300. Had a nice little apartment with Joe Lorig, and you couldn't tell me nothing. We were rolling.
James, it's amazing because all along you're just building, right? Do you feel that way coaching at these places that, hey, this is kind of what I want to do and I'm getting pretty good at it?
No, I think first of all, when you play small school ball, you kind of got to work your way up the ladder. I don't have the contacts, I don't have the network
Sure.
that a lot of other coaches had. But I will say this, there's an advantage of coaching small school ball because you get a lot more responsibility and you have to wear a lot more hats, and there's value in that.
You get an opportunity to come back east following the year at Idaho State, and that's to work for Ron Vanderlinden and Ralph Friedgen ultimately at Maryland in your first trip there. What was that opportunity like in this particular spot in your career?
Yeah, I was fortunate because I was home on spring break visiting my mom just
Okay.
outside of Philadelphia. And the receivers coach, Craig Johnson, left and went to the NFL. Mike Gundy was the quarterback's coach. Mike Loxley was the running back's coach. And I ended up driving over for an interview and getting that job. That was my first big break at the University of Maryland, Ron Vanderlinden, like you mentioned. And then when Ron got let go, I ended up getting retained. Me and Mike Loxley got retained with Ralph. And then we went on a really good run there at Maryland for 5 years and had a ton of success with Coach Friedgen.
You take all this into account, and then you get this move to Maryland. What influences have carried on for you with these? Like
With
Ralph Friedgen, Ron Vanderlinden, Alex Wood at JMU, Mike Price, Larry Lewis. What has all that meant into what James Franklin has built as a head coach?
Yeah, so Mike Price was just a really, really nice person, really good guy. And I think his staff worked hard for him because he was such a good guy. Ralph really taught me offensive football, was extremely demanding. I learned probably more in that period of time with Ralph Friedgen, turning that program around, all the success, the ACC championship, the BCS game against Florida, the Orange Bowl. Learned a ton under Ralph. And then, I would say the other big influence was, I think you're going to get to here in a little bit, is my time with the Packers.
Yeah, Mike Sherman.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to fit. Everything kind of works. And I think you were only in Green Bay 1 year.
Yep.
Mike Sherman, though, has kind of been omnipresent in your career since, right?
Yep. Yeah, and Coach Sherman got let go, but it was also the experience of being with Brett Favre. Being around that guy is really valuable. We drafted Aaron Rodgers that year. Aaron was a rookie, so I was with Aaron for his rookie year. Coached the receivers there, Donald Driver, Robert Ferguson, Antonio Chapman, Javon Walker. That was a great experience there. And I will tell you, the Green Bay organization, I learned a ton. Just first-class organization, a lot of things that I experienced while I was there. I said, if I ever get my opportunity, this is a first-class organization. It's run the right way. And a lot of things that we still do today are things that I learned.
That was kind of where I was going to go. At some point along this, are you thinking about, okay, if I get an opportunity to be a head guy, I'm starting to formulate, at least mentally, if not literally on paper, what I want it to be?
Yeah, I don't know if it started then. When I was at the University of Maryland the second time, working with Ralph Friedgen as the offensive coordinator then, and being with Debbie Yao, the athletic director, who I know you're familiar with, and these opportunities started to present themselves. Then I started kind of going back and thinking about all these places I've been, all the lessons I learned, things that I would like to try to recreate, things that I would add to my own game.
It's interesting. You mentioned going back with Ralph. You spent a couple of years at K-State with Ron Prince.
Yep.
And that ends up, I think, being the bridge back to Maryland.
That's right.
Right. So you take all this coaching journey. I mean, you were everywhere. At the end of the day, you had a life of coaching out of East Stroudsburg. And then in kind of looking back at your story, I'm fascinated also by the things you did, like in high school when I heard you delivered pizzas and newspapers and things like that. And then like in college, work for a mortgage company and what was the Water and Sewer Authority?
Water and Sewer Authority, yeah.
Those are life lessons in themselves to one day help you, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, very much so. All these experiences, even obviously probably my biggest influence is my mom. My dad was in the Air Force, stationed in Manchester, England, meets my mom. He brings her back to this romantic city called Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dad gets a job working in Trenton, New Jersey at a General Motors plant. My mom had a huge influence. She pretty much was the person that raised me and my sister in pretty much a single parent home for most of our upbringing. But then, yeah, all these different coaches and all these different experiences and blue-collar family and have worked really since the time I was 13 years old, all these different jobs that you mentioned, whether it was landscaping or the Water and Sewer Authority. But I understand the value of a dollar and hard work. I learned that from my mom and all these great coaches I was with.
When you get an opportunity to go to Vanderbilt, what was that like for you to finally get the head coaching opportunity you'd been clearly working for?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I was in a little bit of a challenging situation. I was at the University of Maryland. I was the head coach in waiting. That was early on in that head coach in waiting deal. And then the AD that I signed my deal with, Debbie Yao, leaves and goes to NC State.
Right.
And then Ralph, who had a 10-year contract, was going to retire. Now he doesn't want to retire, and I'm stuck in the middle of all of this. And then the Vanderbilt opportunity presents itself, get offered a Vanderbilt job, take it and go there. And I'm working for a great guy by the name of David Williams. David passed away. David is one of my big mentors, him and his wife Gail, big influences on me. But had a tremendous opportunity there in the SEC, and David was a huge part of that, right? Went to a place where people said you couldn't win. Had only been to 4 bowl games in 122 years, I think, before we got there. Had one winning season in the 30 years before we went there. And we went to 3 straight bowl games and won 9 games 2 years in a row. I think we beat Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee for the first time, or hadn't happened since like 1915 or something like that. So had a lot of success. It's funny, though, with a bunch of small school coaches like me. Brent Pry, his dad was my offensive coordinator in college, and Brent's first year coaching was at East Stroudsburg with me. Sean Spencer, coach who played at Clarion, and was my D-line coach for a long time. And I had a core group of guys stay with me a long time.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were just small school guys that were appreciative of being at Vanderbilt and happy for the opportunity.
You guys punched up. You didn't mind punching up. Right? I mean,
well, we had no choice.
Right, but you came with that mentality. I mean, even like I think Zach Stacy was one of your best running backs.
Yep.
And he was a guy who was thought to be too small maybe at some other places, right? Yep. And it feels like that's kind of the way you wanted it to be, at least early on, right?
Yeah, we had a bunch of guys that had a chip on their shoulder, and we're excited about building something special and doing something special. And the coaches were kind of like that, and the players were like that, and we went undefeated in non-conference play, which was something we studied and they hadn't done there. It's hard to be at Vanderbilt and have a losing record non-conference and then go into SEC play. So we went into SEC play with confidence and had a ton of success. I'm still close with a lot of those players. I'm still close with a lot of them coaches. But it was a great time and a great opportunity.
So you built success, then the Penn State opportunity. On the emotional scale, where is that in this coaching world you have?
I have a couple interviews at a couple different places, and the Penn State job is the one I want for a lot of reasons. I'm from Pennsylvania.
Sure.
I grew up just outside of Philadelphia. Obviously, my time at East Stroudsburg. So I just was most comfortable and knew the most about it, but didn't know all the specifics. And as you know, taking over at a challenging time. I think we had 53 scholarship players when I got there. We only had 4 scholarship offensive linemen total. There was a lot of challenges to overcome at a pivotal time, in the program. So we went in there and got to work, and pretty much that staff that was with me at Vanderbilt, almost the entire staff came with me, and that helped. It allowed us to hit the ground running.
Was there a lot of similarity in Vanderbilt and Penn State in the build?
Not really, because Vanderbilt had hit rock bottom. And I tell people a lot of times it's easier to take over sometimes a program that's hit rock bottom because the administration, the players, everybody, they want to have success and they're willing to do whatever it takes. And although Penn State had been through some challenges, obviously, from an NCAA perspective and some other areas, they never really had hit rock bottom in terms of losses and losing seasons and things like that. Billy O'Brien had done a phenomenal job. Me and Billy were on staff together at the University of Maryland as well. But there was still a ton of work that needed to be done. But a very different rebuild. You're talking about rebuilding one of the most historic programs in college football history after one of the biggest challenges, compared to a program that really hadn't found success ever.
I don't know if there are highlight moments for you personally in this, but 2016 just kind of pops off the page. You guys won the Big Ten. You're the conference coach of the year. There's a stretch in October that just seemed to jumpstart the entire run, where you beat Minnesota, Maryland, and then Ohio State second in the country. You get them at home. I mean, does that year step out above some of the others?
Yeah, because it was year 3. We took over a program under sanctions, which I would never recommend doing, because everybody says, oh, we understand you're walking in a tough situation. We'll have patience, and then there's no patience. But yeah, those players. I think back of all those players, most of those players that competed for that Big Ten championship season, we signed in that first year at Vanderbilt. We didn't get the job until late January. And it was a scramble, and there was some players that came with us that were committed to us at Vanderbilt. A lot of those guys ended up having great careers in college, and a lot of those guys played in the NFL. I'm still close with a ton of those guys. So yeah, that year was special because it kind of also put Penn State back on the map and allowed people to stop talking about what had happened there and allowed us to start really building and moving the program forward.
It also felt like, at least from an outside perspective, that the work you'd done at Vanderbilt and the success you'd built there had now also been achieved at Penn State. That you had gone there, proven, hey, this is what this is when James Franklin runs a program, right? And to me, I don't, validate's always an interesting word in times like these, but it felt like it was no joke what had happened at Vanderbilt because you turned around and did it again at Penn State.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's interesting because I didn't feel like when we first went there that, unless you were a real football fan, you didn't necessarily follow Vanderbilt football much, but I think people in the South did.
Yeah.
So when we went there, we kind of had to earn our stripes again, and we were able to do that.
The other part about this, in reading about your career, and the one thing I think you've shown everyone how important it is your family. And if you listen to some of the things the players say, they appreciate because they, I think it sounds like, respect the bond the family has and the bond you're trying to create of a family with your football program. I don't know that they intersect like that, but there's no doubt your family is a big part of what you're doing professionally.
Yeah, I think if you're doing it right, and when I say right, I'm just saying the way we do it,
sure,
is to me, they need to be blended, right? I think as coaches, we all have a little bit of that guilt that we don't spend enough time with our family. So the way we've always done it is The kids are always welcome in the facility. The wives are always welcome in the facility. Not only is that important for our own families and for our own health, but there's also an aspect in that it allows our players, some of them to see, what hopefully a healthy family looks like.
In watching the way things happened a year ago and now coming to Blacksburg, what did you learn in that window of time? You knew you wanted to be back in the game, obviously, or you wouldn't have taken the job. But was there something that you got from a perspective that maybe you wouldn't have had it been end of season to the start of the next season type thing?
Yeah, in some ways, I wish there was a little bit more time because you're going through a process, right? It's 12 years you've given yourself and your family, you poured your heart and soul into something, and all of a sudden it changes like that. And you don't have a whole lot of time to process it, right? You're trying to process it, you're trying to learn, you're trying to grow. We tell the players all the time that you need to be constantly growing and learning and evolving and getting better, but are you truly doing that as well? And spending some time to really look in the mirror and say, okay, what could I do better? What can I learn from this situation? And jotting all those things down. But as you're doing those things and you're trying to take the time, and you say you wanted to get back in, but it took some time. It took a little bit of time. And the problem is the phone calls start. You're getting calls from a lot of the jobs that were open and people wanted to talk. So you didn't get as much time to process it as maybe you like, and then your wife and your agent convinced you to go on ESPN at Georgia, and I don't know if I was completely ready to do that, but that went well, and I think that helped. So this was the right decision for me because I would have drove my wife and kids and everybody crazy being home. But it took some time. It took some time to kind of work through those things, and it also helps you recognize kind of who your core people are. As you get older, your circle gets tighter and tighter. And what was really powerful is friends and family members flying in or driving in from all over the country to be with us during that time period. And that was important. That was important for us as a family, and I know it was important for me.
So when you start in Blacksburg, does it feel different? Does it feel different than Vanderbilt? Does it feel different than State College? Does it feel different than Idaho State? I mean, is it a new start for James Franklin?
Yeah, so it's interesting because there's some similarities, but there's some differences. And I tell people all the time, like when you're building programs, you can take lessons from Vanderbilt and you can take lessons from Penn State, but it's not like you can just bring that model and plug it in at Virginia Tech because all these places are unique and they're sophisticated. But in some ways, it's a blend of the two, right? Virginia Tech has hit rock bottom. Penn State never really did. Vanderbilt had been at rock bottom for a long time, right? So there's some of that you sense there. There's so much pride and tradition there from when that place was rolling for a long time under Coach Beamer, but they haven't really experienced that in a number of years. And one of our biggest challenges, none of the current recruits have seen that, right? The media has, the parents have, the high school coaches have, but none of the recruits have. So getting them to understand what Virginia Tech was and what Virginia Tech will be again.
What do you think opening night will be like?
From what I saw at the spring game, which we had a phenomenal spring game in terms of support, better than a lot of people have for traditional home games, I think it's going to be special. As you know, it's just people love football at Virginia Tech and in Blacksburg and in that community. And I think there's an excitement right now that there hasn't been in a long time. We still got a lot of work to do, but I think there's truly an excitement because the university's made a commitment. And I think they see signs of a future of Virginia Tech football that they remember.
Would the quarterback at the high school in Bucks County, PA, ever envision this?
No.
This journey?
No. I had I had no idea. I've been extremely blessed and extremely fortunate to be with really good people and was given a chance and given some opportunities. And fortunately, because of how I was raised by my mom and my sister and coaches that had a huge impact on me, I was able to run with a couple of those opportunities and maximize them. But no, I would never look back and think that I would have an opportunity to be a head coach in the SEC and be successful, a head coach in the Big Ten and be successful, a game away from playing for the national championship.
Exactly.
And now have an opportunity to take over a program like Virginia Tech that has so much pride and passion. Three conferences, the ACC, the Big Ten, the SEC. So I could never imagine that and take tremendous pride in it.
It's an amazing journey. Welcome back to the ACC.
Well, I appreciate it. It's great to see you.
Thanks.
I'm so glad you're still with us.
Yeah, it's a special edition of the ACC Huddle. Our thanks to James Franklin, and thank you for watching.